Second. Thank you. I'll pass it over to Laura.
Hello, I'm Laura Graziano. I'm the Community Resilience Planner with Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission. Curtis and I will be running tech, so any questions, feel free to message either of us. And I'll pass it off to Emily Raby.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emily Raby. I'm the Executive Director here at Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission. I will hand it over to Sarah.
Sarah Demers. I don't know. Are there
Yes,
other
I should
Sarahs?
have. You're right. I should have put the last name too.
There's usually about a half a dozen Sarahs on any meeting that I participate in. So, Sarah Demers, I am with the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, and I am the point of contact for all MBRC applications that come in for the state of Maine.
Sarah, if you can pick someone else to call, we'll try to
Sure.
keep that format going.
The next person I see on my screen is Brian Dankos.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Brian Dankos, and I'm with the Deputy Director of the Mid-Coast Council of Governments, and the only non-planner. And I will pass it on to about Matt Lutkus.
Hi, Matt Lutkus. I'm the newest member of the commission. I'm an at-large appointee from the Lincoln County Commissioners. Let's see. We'll turn it over to Max.
Hi, everyone. I'm Max Johnstone with the Mid-Coast Council of Governments and also the planner over in Waldoboro. Fun to be here and glad to see everyone's home safe. I'll pass it over to Michael Martone, or most people.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Martone. I'm the town planner for Damerscotta and Newcastle. I will pass it over to Evan Gudkowski.
Nailed it.
Yes.
Evan Gudkowski, County Commissioner for Lincoln County and County Rep for the Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission. And I'll pass it over to Mal.
Mal Carey from the town of Newcastle. I'm the rep from one of the reps from the town to the RPC. Also on the Geo Library Board, which may occasionally intersect this world. Thank you. And let's see, Ms. Verrill, next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry I'm late. My name is Sri Verrill. I am the contracted resilience planner and project manager for the towns of Boothbay and Boothbay Harbor. And I have yet to attend, but I have been nominated to be the Boothbay representative to the Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission Board. I gather I'm supposed to tag someone. I have no idea who's left. Michael, did you go yet? Oh, perfect.
Good. I think you could get rid of one of the Michael.
Do we have multiple Michaels open? Oh boy.
I see two.
One was
I'll just
announced.
introduce you, Michael Tomko from Boothbay Harbor. Good to see you, and you're also on our board for Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission. And who else hasn't gone? I'll let somebody. Marianne Pinkham, have you gone yet?
No. Marianne Pinkham, Noblesboro rep to the Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission, where I am the vice chair of the Noblesboro Planning Board.
And I'm Susan Takano. I'm the development director over at Coastal Rivers Conservation Trust.
I'll move it to Tina.
Hi, my name's Tina. I'm a Noblesboro representative and I'm on the broadband committee. I will pass it on to Caroline.
Hello, I'm Caroline Paris. I am a grant writer representing the Maine Tasting Center in Wiscasset.
Rachel, have you gone yet? Do we have Rachel from Bristol? All right, let's maybe go with Aaron next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aaron Krastowski. I'm from the town of Wiscasset. I'm the Economic Development Director there. Looking forward to the presentation.
Thanks so much, Aaron. Linda Schaefer, have you gone yet?
Hi, yeah, I'm Linda Schaefer. Yeah, I'm with CHIP, Community Housing Improvement Project out of Newcastle, Maine.
Fantastic. Thanks, Linda. I think we might have someone on the line, our county administrator, Carrie, are you there? She might be on the line, but not able to talk. I think I got everyone. Have I missed anyone? Okay. Well, excellent. I think it takes a little extra time to go through those introductions, but it's a really nice opportunity to know who's out there, who's in the room, and if you haven't connected with them, this gives you the opportunity to know about them or send them a direct message or something like that. At this point, we're going to sort of move on to more of the formal presentation of this meeting. We have a couple of guests here to talk about the Northern Border Regional Commission grant opportunities that you are all now eligible to apply for. We have Sarah from the Department of Economic and Community and Economic Development from the state, who covers all Northern Border Regional Commission work. And then we have Brian Dankos from Midcoast Council of Governments. We are going to do some introductions. I'm going to let them do their own introductions so you can get to know them better. But at this point, I will pass it on to Sarah, and then following that, we'll hear from Brian, and then after that, you'll hear from me again. And then after that, for about the last 25 minutes or so, we'll open it up for questions and answers. So just give you an idea of how our time together will go. So at this point, I will hand the unmute off to Sarah. Sarah, if you would kick it off.
Sure. Thank you all for getting together today on this snowy day, taking time out of your snow maintenance schedule. I'm glad to be here. It's very exciting to have Lincoln County added to the NBRC region as an eligible area. That was accomplished late in December when NBRC was reauthorized for another 5 years by Congress. There were a number of changes made to the different commissions across the nation, and part of that was adding in new areas. So in Maine, that's Lincoln County, and in New Hampshire, they added a couple of counties as well. I'm going to talk just a little bit, give sort of a high overview of the NBRC process and programs, and I will make a really good segue for Brian to come in and talk about his role with NBRC as well. So as you may or may not know, NBRC is an economic development agency of the federal government. It covers areas in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. And for the majority of the funding that the state of Maine accesses, only Maine applicants compete for the funding. So, for instance, this year in Catalyst, they're making $9 million available. That's the broad bucket. I'll talk more about that program. It's the one that the majority of people will be applying for. Of that $9 million, you are only competing against state of Maine applications. In NBRC's two other programs, Forest Economy Program and Timber for Transit, and again, I'll cover the details of those, you are competing for a bucket that is available to all of the states. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about your application and how competitive you want to write your grant. Just it's helpful to understand sort of who your competition is. NBRC has been around for a while now. I'm not exactly sure when it was established, but really started ramping up with projects around 2016, 2015 in that time frame. So we've got almost 10 years behind our belt with working with NBRC. Prior to the Biden administration, NBRC made, $1 to $3 million available a year for each state. We currently have access to money that was authorized through the bipartisan infrastructure law. So NBRC, as I mentioned, is making, or at least the current plan is to make about $9 million available in the spring round. And we will have a better idea as the year progresses what that will be for the fall round. So 2 funding rounds per year, which is somewhat unusual for a federal program. 9 million in the spring and probably 4-ish is in the fall, but that's to be determined. Don't get too hung up on that $4 million. Hopefully more. So NBRC is a federal state partnership. It's, again, very unique to other federal programs. There's a federal commission. Each of the governors of the 4 states I mentioned sit on that commission, as well as a federal co-chair who's appointed by the president. The state governors delegate their role sort of down the food chain. So the governor does not attend the meetings, but the governor does get the final say on which projects are put forward for the state of Maine. So that's an important thing to know as you're thinking about your applications too. Yes, it's federal money, and yes, the federal side of the equation administers those funds. However, all projects that are selected in Maine are selected by people in Maine. So when you're writing your application, it's important to know that you are being scored both on the state scoring side as well as the federal scoring side. So NBRC has been doing 2 funding rounds a year for the last couple of years. This will be our 2nd year. Funds projects, as I said, primarily from an economic development lens. So while there are categories that focus on transportation infrastructure, for instance, or broadband infrastructure, or outdoor recreation, or workforce development, all the lens that we're looking for and sort of making awards on is the economic impact of your project. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. If you have a community center, if you have a business development kind of project, we're really looking for, tell us what the economic impact is for your community, for your region, for your target service area. So I mentioned a little bit about the federal side and the state side. There's the commission that meets. The commission meets to vote on projects and sets the materials, the funding materials every year. And as I mentioned, there are 2 funding rounds in 2025. We've got a spring round. The current timeline and deadline is February 28th for pre-applications and April 11th for the full application. So NBRC requires a pre-application, and they have a grants management system that is online, and there's a link on their website. I put in the chat a link to the NBRC website. I strongly encourage anyone who's interested in applying for funds to spend some time reviewing that website, especially the resources tab. That's where you'll find anything and everything you're looking for about NBRC programs. So February 28th is the pre-application. You can access their online grants management system right from their website. There are resources on their website on how to register. and a link to their grants management system right on their website. So registration is the first step that you need to take, and folks can start doing that now, is my understanding. And then the second piece is the pre-application. Again, I'm going to repeat myself. February 28th is the due date. Pre-applications are required. So you must submit a pre-application if you want to be invited to apply for funding. And that pre-application phase, again, is through their grants management system. It is all online. Folks like Brian are available to help and assist with that process. The pre-application review phase is done by NBRC. They are basically, in reviewing your pre-application, they are determining eligibility. So what does eligibility look like? Eligibility is, are you an eligible applicant, a nonprofit, a municipality, quasi-governmental? That's a lot of our sewer and water districts that aren't municipally owned, soil and water conservation districts, and then tribes. Tribes are also eligible. I should also mention schools, whether it's university, technical school, they're also eligible to apply. So that pre-application process, you're just at that point determining if you're eligible. We're not winnowing the batch. We're not making decisions based on quality of information submitted or quantity of information submitted. We're really just looking at, are you eligible? And if you're eligible, then you will be issued an invitation to apply, as well as often feedback on your application. So areas where you can improve your application. And then the full application, as I've mentioned, is due April 11th. And the good thing about the NBRC grants management system is that all the information you put in at the time of pre-application will be copied and put into your full application, so you don't have to rewrite it. It just pre-populates from your pre-application, but you can go back and edit and enhance and make it better at that point. So that is the overall process. Register, pre-application, application, and awards for the spring round are anticipated to be announced in the first week of June. So that's sort of like a big picture overview of what is NBRC and what is the application process. Alex, do you want me to talk now about the programs, or should I talk more about the partnership and hand it over to Brian?
I think it would be great just to roll right into programs at this point, since we're hearing from you. That would be great.
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before I go into that, I'm gonna just sort of put a place marker for where Brian's going to come in and say part of that partnerships, the state and federal partnership is one side, and then there's a local side of that partnership as well, and that's the local development districts. That's the term that NBRC uses. NBRC has a mandate to work with local development districts as a resource to help build capacity within the NBRC region. So folks like Brian, KV COGS, and economic development districts primarily serve as a resource to local applicants. And I'm going to let Brian talk more about that, but I just wanted to put a word out there saying they are a really important part of that partnership. And we highly value their engagement and assisting us with helping at the local level. So I'm going to roll into the three primary NBRC programs. I mentioned briefly Catalyst. That is our largest, sort of most popular, broadest category of funding. That's the category that will have $9 million available in the spring round for applicants. And that program is kind of cut into three different categories. The biggest and most traditional is our infrastructure program. That is primarily construction projects, and they primarily have some kind of infrastructure focus. They can cover things like healthcare, as I mentioned, transportation, broadband, telecommunications. It's a pretty big bucket, that that infrastructure category, and applicants can request up to $1 million in funding. It's important to note that in Lincoln County, you are designated as a transitional county. So MBRC does an economic analysis annually of the different counties, and counties kind of fall in two different buckets in Maine: transitional or distressed. Transitional counties are eligible for 50% of the total project budget. So if you have $1 million project, you can ask for up to $500,000 in that infrastructure category. If you have a $2 million project, you can apply for up to $1 million. NBRC does have criteria to allow applicants to apply for more than $1 million. However, I'll note that Maine has yet to award a project above $1 million. And that's something we can talk more about on a one-on-one basis. We at Maine did submit some language to NBRC in our scoring criteria to give us a pathway to make grant awards more than $1 million. So there are some criteria that we've set out for the first time this funding round, and you'll see those in the program manual once that gets published by NBRC. The next bucket of funding under the Catalyst program is the non-infrastructure program, and that typically are non-construction projects or construction light. It's construction is not sort of the primary part of what you're doing with your project. So sometimes we'll get grants that are a renovation of a building that is going to provide programming. So we're funding, primarily what we're funding is the programming part of it, but there might be some office space reconfiguration or ADA compliance kinds of components to the project. So it is a component. Construction can be a component of it, but the major thrust of the project is typically not construction. And again, that category is up to $500,000 award. And again, Lincoln County, I haven't figured out a good way to describe this. Of the total project budget, 50% can be awarded by NBRC. So you need to create and come up with a 50% match for those projects as well. Non-infrastructure projects fund things like workforce development, business development, some outdoor rec and tourism kinds of activities come under that. And I think there's a couple of others that fall under that program as well. So non-infrastructure is the second category. The third category, which is brand new this year, and again, I've seen mention of it only briefly by NBRC. I don't have a lot of details about it, but they did this year create a planning category. And those awards are up to $100,000. So this is planning for those activities that could lead to a infrastructure grant. That's my understanding. Again, haven't seen all the program details yet, but something to look for if you're interested in doing a planning grant. So planning might be funding of the design for your wastewater expansion. So you could apply in year one for those funds to do the design work, and then come back in year 2 or 3 once the design work's done and request funding from NBRC to do the actual wastewater expansion project. So that is Catalyst in a nutshell. I will say with all of our programs, but especially Catalyst, we are oversubscribed. So the last 2 years, we received 39 applications for the total bucket of funding. And I think we were able to fund in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 projects. And so we're really looking at readiness and how competitive your project is in terms of economic impact to your region. Readiness can be you've got your matching funds in hand, you've got a town or board vote that's saying, you know, we're committed to this and we're ready to move ahead. It can be engineering, architectural designs completed or underway. Those are some of the things that we look for to help us understand your level of readiness. So that is Catalyst. I'm going to quickly touch on two other programs that are popular in Maine. The Forest Economy Program. This is one of those funding sources that is much smaller, about $4 million annually. And it is a program to invest in infrastructure that supports Maine's forest economy. And we usually see 1 or 2 applications a year in the Forest Economy Program funding program, and those are about $1 million awards as well. So examples might be, we have funded investments at the University of Maine for some research and development of technology to do, you've seen maybe the 3D printed house. That was an MBRC grant, was to help with the development of that kind of product using wood-based materials. We've done workforce training programs in that support the forest economy. I'm thinking probably this won't be the most popular program in Lincoln County, but I wanted to make sure people were aware of it in the event that you did have a project from the county that was eligible and a good fit. The other program is relatively new. It's called Timber for Transit, and it's a program that we're really excited to see applications come in from Maine. This is a program that's intended to get high-value wood products in transportation infrastructure, so replacing some of the steel, concrete materials with wood-based materials. And when I talk about transportation, the definition is very broad, so it can be relevant for Lincoln County, might be municipal wharves and piers, or ferry terminals, that kind of infrastructure. So when I talk about high value wood products, we're talking about glulam, cross laminated timber, composite timber, those kinds of materials. Also replacing traditional bridge structures with wood components would be eligible under Timber for Transit. We have not yet seen an application from Maine into the Timber for Transit program, and we're very excited to. So if that's something that your town or nonprofit is interested in, definitely let me know, and I'd be happy to connect folks with some resources and partners for that program. And then lastly, I'll just mention, I encourage you to look on MBRC's webpage on the program areas tab. There are other funding sources that MBRC partners with. They have a partnership with the EPA on the Recreation Economy for Rural Communities. That's a grant program that provides technical assistance to communities that want to bolster their outdoor recreation economy. We also have some funding through the Department of Labor, their work program. So this would be a workforce development program, usually of a larger scale. So maybe a partnership with a community college or a technical center, or a specific industry. Those are much larger grants, up to $5 million, I believe, and all that information is available on the MBRC website. And then the last one is HRSA, and I'm afraid I don't remember the acronym for HRSA, but it's health related. And they also do quite a bit of funding in the MBRC region. And basically with these 3 programs, communities in the MBRC region receive priority consideration for funding. So that's the partnership. MBRC plays a role in helping to score those proposals. And if you're a community that's MBRC eligible, you will get priority consideration for those programs. That is programs in a nutshell. I'm sure you all have a lot of questions, but before we do that, I want to pass it on to Brian to talk a little bit about, the relationship at the local level.
Thanks, Sarah. And first of all, I wanted to thank Alex and Emily and the whole Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission team for hosting this event and getting the word out, because very good attendance for a snow day or afternoon. And like I said, it won't, I think Alex gave me 10 minutes, but I don't think I'll even take 5. But so first of all, I just want to give an overview of Midcoast Council of Governments. We are a council of governments. We are a nonprofit that serves a region from, Brunswick and Harpswell all the way to Waldo County. Although that being said, our Council of Governments does not include Lincoln County because Lincoln County has its own regional planning commission. That said, we do, I guess I'm speaking today sort of as from the Economic Development District or EDD perspective of MCOG, and that Lincoln County is included in the Mid-Coast Economic Development District, which, like I said, covers more or less the same region as I mentioned earlier, Brunswick to Belfast. And I also want to welcome Lincoln County communities to Northern Border. Prior to this year, like Knox and Waldo counties were the only mid-coast counties that were eligible for Northern Border grant funding. And I don't believe Max is on this call too, but I don't believe we've actually done any assistance for any Waldo County communities, but that's mostly because Waldo County is, in terms of the economic development district, it's divided between 3 entities: us, KVCOG, and Eastern Maine Development Corporation. What else? So what is MCOG's role with the Northern Border? We, like I said before, or like Sarah said, we are a local development district, or LDD, and Northern Border encourages applicants to contact us for pre-application and application technical assistance. We also, Northern Border also requires grantees when they get an award to contract with an LDD to administer their grant awards, which essentially involves like reporting quarterly for like narrative, or I think they call them progress performance reports, and then annually for the financial reports. And we can do that in a variety of ways. We can just, for the more sort of grant savvy grantees, we can simply review reports that they draft before they submit them, and in some cases we can, I do the draft reports and forward them to the grantee for their approval and signature. And I will say that, like I did mention earlier, that like Northern Border requires grantees to contract with an LDD for, to administer their grant award, but grantees may request a waiver from LDD contract or grant administration, but they have to do that as part of the pre-application. So, and like I said, and I guess I should back up and give you a little bit of uh, background of what LDD grant administration. Well, like we get the funding side. We get paid through we get a Northern Border Regional Commission technical assistance grant to help applicants, with pre-application, application, that sort of thing. And then, but like for grant administration, we actually are built into the budget 2% of the Northern Border funding. Although I think they just made a change that it's a minimum of 8,000 and or up to 2% of the award. I would that's pretty much my presentation. I would like to point out sort of two, things that are sort of unique to Northern Border. One is that, and I've been, doing this for maybe arguably too long, but prior to Northern Border, I was always under the impression that like federal grants that required matching funds it was non-federal match. Um, but that said, Northern Border allows grantees to match their award with other federal funds, provided the other federal agency approves that their funds be used in that way. And so, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. Although I would add the caveat because one of our grantees in Knox County ran into this is that like if a grantee does use federal funds to match a Northern Border grant, the total federal funds cannot exceed 80% of the project. So you can't 100% federally fund a project, with using Northern Border. It'll get you to 80%, but not to 100. Um, and I think I guess that's it. And please feel free to ask questions when we get to that point. So thanks.
I'm just
Great.
gonna,
Thanks, Brian. Yep,
if
go
I
ahead,
can,
Sarah.
Alex, just boost Brian's presentation by saying we at the state strongly encourage you to work with your LDD early and often. We find that applicants that do work with their LDD have a much easier time of administering their grant. They have better grant proposals. There's just a million reasons why it is in your best interest to partner with the local development district. Even if you're a town who has a lot of experience administering federal grants, I still encourage you to meet up with Brian, talk about the project. It just has, I've just seen so many instances where that little bit of added extra capacity makes things go so much smoother for folks.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, and I'll echo you on that. Brian is your person in Lincoln County to provide that LDD support that is designated on behalf of Northern Border Regional Commission. So, and getting into or moving on from that, this is sort of my part of the presentation or the talk where I just explain a little bit about where my role comes in. I lead economic development here at Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission, and though I'm not an LDD, Brian and I work together through Northern Border Regional Commission and a number of other things. So in particular, if you are thinking about a grant or a grant application, I highly recommend reaching out to Brian, but you can also reach out to me. Um, we've already had a couple of meetings about some potential applications, so we can work together to talk about what your project concepts are and sort of help flesh those out. Brian's been working on these grants for a long time, so he's really good at sort of pinging around grant ideas and concepts and deciding based on criteria whether they're a really good fit or not. And overall, our job is to make sure that we're getting uh, NBRC the highest quality applications possible. And in some cases, maybe this isn't the right time to apply. We can also talk about that. So that's sort of my role in all of this at Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission. We do at the Planning Commission offer a number of other supports in general related to grant assistance, et cetera, or finding data that you might need for a grant project. But in particular, with this particular grant program, I highly encourage you to flesh things out with Brian and I'm happy to help facilitate meetings, or even we can host them at our office, and I think Brian might be able to host them at his office too. So That is generally our role. And I could go on about what we do here at Lincoln County Regional Planning. And I had sort of planned a little bit of that, but I'm actually not going to do it now just based on the time. It's now 3:44. We're a bit over what I had expected to start the Q&A. So I think we might go ahead into the Q&A section of today's meeting, if that's okay with Sarah and Brian. Okay, great. And I am just going to open it up for questions. We do like if you can use the raise hand option through Zoom to ask your questions. You're also welcome to put your question in the chat or let us know that you have a question and we can call on you. You can also ask me questions anonymously in the chat, and I can anonymize those if you're not comfortable sharing your questions with other people. Laura just put our services booklet in the chat for Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission. Thanks for doing that. So at that, let's get started with questions. And it looks like Mal, you're the first person to ask or have the chance to ask a question. So if you want to go ahead and ask your questions, let's you can go ahead and do that.
Given the circumstances of the times, how secure is the funding that you folks have to potentially offer? Thank you.
Well, I really can't answer that question. I don't work for the federal government, so I don't have a direct line to their process that they're undergoing at NBRC. They have put a temporary hold while they analyze some of the recent information they've gotten from the administration. However, my understanding is that they are planning on moving ahead with 2 funding rounds in 2025, and they will be updating their website very soon with information on webinars that they offer for each of the funding programs. So I can't really answer how secure they are, Mel. I think that's a question that we're going to have to probably keep figuring out. I will say, however, my experience with NBRC is that they are unlike any other federal funder I've worked with. They are highly responsive if you email them. They are incredibly flexible, and they have an attitude of how can we say yes? How can we say yes to what this applicant is asking? So while there is some uncertainty, I feel pretty confident that they are going to find a way to move forward in 2025 in a way that is as undisrupted as possible for you all.
Yeah, my question was basically from the point of view if a entity is considering a project that would depend on your funding, they could spend a lot of their time and effort preparing for something that cannot happen. So I wish us all luck.
Yeah, I absolutely am empathetic to the situation, but I can't answer that. I have no way of predicting what this administration will do.
Thank you.
The question that came in from the chat anonymously. There was a question about putting public bathrooms in and what kind of I guess competitive, if that would be a competitive or eligible application. I imagine in particular this would be like in a coastal town that's more busier in the tourism season in the summer. So sort of I would imagine attracting sort of like that seasonal economic development. And that could be part of a second part of your answer, which is this is the impact, the economic development impact overall year-round economic impact, or is it just general revenue considered? So if it's a seasonal town, the revenue generated during the high season is sufficient.
I'll start with the second half of your question, Alex. whether it's having a seasonal impact or year-round impact doesn't particularly make a difference. It's just how you describe it, how you demonstrate it, how you justify it. So I think projects that have or communities that have a high tourist season are not disadvantaged from a community that has a year-round impact. You know what I mean? So one's not better than the other, one's not worse than the other. They're equally important to MBRC. A public bathroom, I've definitely never seen a project like that funded that was strictly public bathrooms. So I would need to think a little bit more about that and how we might package that and how we might make that argument. I think it would fall under basic public infrastructure, but it might also be part of a tourism. So I'd have to think about it. I will say that MBRC is not the funding program to go to for public facilities. So if you are looking to enhance an existing town office, fire department, those kinds of things are not typically going to be competitive for MBRC funding. It's really about how are you enhancing or supporting the economic viability of your region. And folks have tried to make an argument that having another fire station on the other side of town helps, but my experience is there are other projects that are more competitive typically.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. Shri, I think your hand is up. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm just wondering, where are we in this? I looked at the map of MCOG and saw the big gap, which I assume is Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission, but somehow we're together in a district, and I'm just wondering, where is that? I understand where the county boundaries are.
Yeah, Shri, I think I just put a link in there, and I don't want to answer for Sarah or Brian, but I didn't hear them responding. There's a list of the LDDs, and I think what you put in the chat was a list of or a map of economic development districts, which is different from the local development districts through the Northern Border Regional Commission. So the Northern Border Regional Commission has its own contracted local development districts, and our district here in Lincoln County, we share it with Knox and Waldo, and MCOG is the LDD for those counties. Sarah, am I getting that right?
Yeah, more or less.
Shri, is that clear to you that Brian is Booth Bay's LDD?
I do understand that you're the contact, but I'm just like, where's this there's a region that we keep referring to, and I'm just wondering where that region is. I mean, I know I'm in it since I was invited, and I know we're in Lincoln County, but I heard, was it Harpswell up to Waldo County? Is that it? Is it
Yeah,
not
maybe I should jump in and say that I may have confused the issue because that is the and as a matter of fact, the map that you put up there is even dated because it doesn't show that Knox County is included in the Mid-Coast Economic Development District. So, which it is. So, but I mean, I guess for purposes of this conversation, Lincoln County is eligible to apply for a Northern Border Regional Commission grant. So,
And that's all we care about in this Zoom is Lincoln County. I don't want to hear you guys talk about Knox. That's from your county commissioner. That's that.
Shri, I think
Awesome.
it's a function of planning commissions and economic development districts not always being aligned in Maine. In some parts of the world, they are aligned, and in some parts they are not. And that's where you're getting sort of different units and subunits, and it's because planning and economic development aren't always happening in the same jurisdictions.
Thank you. I think I'm just out of my element here. I'm just gonna be quiet and listen. Thank you.
There was a question about, and again, I don't think this was a particular grant question, so I'd love to hear questions about the grant opportunities before we get into sort of the policy level things. But I'll address the question in the chat, which was about what indicators made Lincoln County eligible, sort of like what made us eligible. And I think it's more a question of like what is the criteria to calculate eligibility in Northern Border Regional Commission. And I do know that it was a state leader who advocated for Lincoln County to be included in the reauthorization bill in Congress, along with I think another Merrimack in New Hampshire, another area. So that was sort of how we became eligible. It was the forethought and the vision of our leadership in the state that brought us into the fold. And what particular calculations she used, I don't know exactly. What I would love to know is what criteria is used to calculate distress versus transitional, if that's something you can answer, Sarah.
I can't answer it in detail, but I can point you to resources. MBRC does have that information on their website, and I can put a link in the chat to where you can find that distress criteria. It's an analysis they do every year, and it is looking at a set of criteria. I'm not even going to try because I'll get it wrong, but it is there. It's publicly available, and you can look at it.
Great, thanks, Sarah. I appreciate that. You also, I think I always like to look at past grant awards, and I can't remember if there's a good spot to find all the grant awards. I have the 2024 awards right here. I can drop that in the chat, but is there a good place for folks to look at past awards so they can get a feel for sort of the kind of projects? Also keeping in mind that obviously there are different players making decisions this time around, as there are every round.
Yes, you can find again on the MBRC webpage. They have by year and by state, and I'll put a link in the chat for that as well. And I do think I would say it's good homework to do if you're considering applying, to kind of get a sense for who's been funded in the past, at what level, what kinds of projects have been funded. I think that's a good place to start your research.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate that.
And I will say, I'll just add, I know that MBRC, as part of their enabling legislation, they have federal requirements on percentage of funds going towards distressed communities, percentage of funds going towards infrastructure. So these are things that they have to report at the federal level. So that's also sort of just some of the background of why we have that information.
That's helpful. And I think you might have mentioned it and we've talked about it before, but the overall awards that we get in Maine aren't competitive with other states. We have our own sort of pot of money, and then generally the awards are geographically distributed. So Lincoln County is not likely to get all the awards, obviously, but they are sort of distributed geographically. Can you talk a little bit more about that so we have sort of an idea of what we might be able to get here?
Geographic distribution is definitely a consideration. And I will say, you won't get money if you don't apply for it. So don't hesitate to apply. There are some counties that are very, very aggressive in applying for funding. So be aggressive. That is the only way you will get funded. And I think I would say, since one of my priorities is sort of looking at a bit of a more equitable distribution, and I think this is just a function of who has applied. It's not equitably distributed across the state. we have some work to do to get that equity at a little bit of a better rate. So that is definitely something I'm looking at when I'm looking at applications. But yeah, readiness, that is, like, as I mentioned, we're looking at how ready is your project. Geographic distribution across the state is another consideration that we're looking at. Could the project, would the project be harmed if it waited and was asked to come back in the next funding round? That's a consideration that we also look at. I would say in 2024, we had a lot more projects in the spring than we had in the fall. I don't know yet if that will be a trend, but it's something to think about when you're preparing your application. The other thing I would say, generally speaking, there's no prohibition, but I don't generally recommend a municipality submitting more than one application in a funding round or a nonprofit. It's just, you're competing against yourself in that situation, and it's better to put forward your best proposal than to put in multiple proposals.
And just to clarify, Sarah, when you say two in one municipality, if there's a nonprofit based in, I'm gonna pick on Damascotta, but please don't think this is anything specific, but it's the first town that came to mind. If the town of Damascotta wanted to apply for some kind of a grant, and then also there was a nonprofit based in Damascotta, that's not what you're talking about. It would be two projects from the town of Damascotta as a municipality submitting an application.
You've got it. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for that.
We do like to see partnership. That is one of the criteria that you're asked to write about in your application. So if the town is going to do a workforce development project and a nonprofit in the same town is going to do a workforce development project, we would prefer to see some collaboration or understanding of, like, are these things building off each other? Are people talking, or are these completely separate kinds of proposals? So that's another, important consideration, is make sure that you are well partnered and that it's clear that there's a community vision for this project.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Do we have any more questions, or have I missed any in the chat?
I think Shri just added one to the chat. Shri wrote, is there a general sense by those who work at the Lincoln County level what projects might already be eligible and competitive?
Shri, I'm wondering who this question might be directed towards, or are you like sort of asking if folks want to talk about their projects?
Well, I'm still trying to get my bearings, as this is my first time, I think, ever in an economic development meeting. However, in the general consistency with other grants, there's a good idea to understand what who your collaborators may be and who your competitors may be, and in terms of accessing funds, it's worthwhile to know what other grants are already, or projects are already ready to go, to gauge how much effort to put into finding another local project. So I'm wondering if everyone here already has well, maybe not everyone, but has a pretty good idea of, like, I know Wiscasset has been working on the sewer, and I thought, this is great. It's great for that. I don't work there, but I know that's a potential project. So I'm just wondering, is that something